first launched Make Way Ministries, one of the things I did was switch my credential to an evangelist credential. And so that put me in the evangelist department with our denomination. And so I had reached out to the head evangelist just to kind of introduce myself, and he was kind of giving me some advice. And he said, well, one thing you can do is talk to your superintendent in your state and set up a meeting and just ask him for maybe a few minutes with the presbytery or something like that, but just kind of share what you're doing. And I was like, okay, well, I knew, Pastor John Wooten was his name. He actually tragically passed away recently.
Oh.
But I knew him personally. So I thought, well, he knows enough about me, but just because I was told to do it, I did it. And so I showed up at Pastor John. I set an appointment with him, and we sat down. I said, well, Brother Tim said I should set up a meeting with you. So I just came to share my story and tell you a little bit about our ministry. And so I just began to share what God had done in my life and ministry and my testimony. And toward the end of the testimony, he broke down crying. And he said, he was very overwhelmed. And he said, there's some things I think you can do to help us, but I can't really tell you right now. I need to make some phone calls, and I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. That was how the meeting ended. So
Okay.
Brittany and I were like, I told Brittany, she said, how'd it go? I said, I'm not sure. Like, I'm waiting for a call back.
Right.
So a side story that goes along with that. So when we were in Macedonia back in 2009, 2010, and all my sin came out, there was the man who was over the Europe region. His name is Greg Mundis, and so he was the regional director. And so when I got back 3 days later, he was the one who called me and said, hey, we need to ask you to resign from your position as a missionary. Like, you need to go through those steps.
Right.
And so I hadn't seen Brother Greg. I mean, I hadn't talked to him since that time, almost 15 years ago. And so I saw him at a meeting the August before I talked to Pastor John. It was just a few weeks before that. And I went up I had our kids and Brittany with me. And so we went up and said, hey, Brother Greg, I don't know if you remember us. And he's like, oh, I remember you.
Yeah. How
And,
could I forget?
Yeah. So I said, I just want to tell you what God did. I gave him a 5-minute testimony, and he's, oh, that's amazing. That's so great. So he and his wife, Sandy, were asked to be the speakers at a ministers retreat that we do every January. And they usually, since that time, Greg had gone from Europe regional director to the director over the whole United States, the World Missions Department. So, and usually the caliber of people they have speak at the event is pretty like high up people. So when Pastor John said, I need to call you in a couple weeks, what he was doing, he had to call Brother Greg and say, hey, you've got 3 sessions to speak at the retreat, but I want Dustin Renz to speak at one of them and share his story if you'll let him.
Wow.
And Brother Greg was like, I just saw Dustin a few weeks ago. Like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so the theme of it, Greg had just survived COVID. He almost died at COVID. And so he wrote a book about his experience. So they wanted stories to be told. So it was crazy. So the whole state of Ohio's there, all the ministers and their families, and they invited me to come. And I got up and shared my testimony with pictures and everything. And at the end, gave some encouragement to the ministers about living a life with accountability and these kind of things. And so at the end, I went down, and Brother Greg was there. He's just weeping and gave me this huge hug. And it's an incredible, like, it's one of those things that I would have never been able to ask for. Like, I would have never in a million years said, Lord, one day I want to preach with the man who fired me from the mission field. And that's something so far beyond anything I could have ever come up with. And the Lord, it was such a gift that the Lord gave me, and the way he orchestrated it all for me to have the opportunity to share. And it's opened up doors, throughout the state of people who heard. But what's amazing is just after that, just a few months, I had not been back to Macedonia since we left. And we left kind of in disgrace, quickly, and no one really knew what happened.
For sure.
So I had felt a leading that possibly there'd be a door open. And so I contacted the missionary there and said, hey, I feel like maybe the Lord's asking us to come back to do ministry. And so, he's a great guy. His name's Tim. He said, hey, when you left, there was other missionaries that had some issues too. And he said, it took several years for me to rebuild some of the trust with the church there. He said, so you can come, but I just can't promise. I don't know who will have you. I just don't know. So I remember I reached out to you and the other board members, like, I feel like I'm supposed to go, but I don't know if, I might be buying a ticket just to go on a vacation or something. So we prayed about it, and you guys said, just do what you feel led. And so I bought the ticket, and like 2 weeks before I left for Macedonia, Tim sent me my schedule, and all of the churches that we had worked with and more, like every day we had ministry, and they all wanted me to come back. And so June of that year, I traveled over there. walked the same streets as I was when I was backslidden. All the memories of all the stuff, being around the city and different things, and had opportunity to go to these churches and preach and share my testimony and tell them this is what happened in my life, and repent to them, and publicly repented. They forgave me publicly. It was just a beautiful thing. And the last day I was getting ready to get on the plane, I went on a walk through the city streets of Skopje. And I felt like the Lord spoke to me and said, now there's nothing that needs healed, nothing broken that needs to be healed. And I didn't realize I carried a burden like all those years, that there was something that was like still in me that wanted to make things right. But for sure, coming back, I felt this release of like, there's nobody to go back to ask forgiveness. I mean, it's all done or whatever. And so that whole journey, of being able to do the minister's retreat, to go back to Macedonia, was really this like piece of healing in my life and ministry that just showed me like God's really interested in restoration. And that was like above and beyond. I mean, like having my marriage restored and family, all that stuff was the most important thing. But even some of these peripheral people that I came in contact with, people I'd done ministry years ago, the Lord gave me opportunity to go back and make things right. And so I'll never forget it, and it'll be something I treasure the rest of my life, I'm sure.